Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Bradley, perhaps better known for his work on Banger TV, to talk about his top 5 albums of the year. How's it going, dude?
It's good, man. It's good. Finish school, time to get back on music hard. So that's where I'm at.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and chat about your favorite 5 albums of the year. I know these lists are hard to do, and I know you're busy with school and everything, but I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about your favorite picks of 2020.
Yeah, man, no worries. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. For those watching, I had to put this off for a while because the last few weeks of school were crazy. So I'm glad that we were able to, link up here.
Yeah, find the time. All right, so 2020 has been a shit show, but there's been a lot of great metal in 2020. Your 5 favorite albums. This is in no specific order, but where do you want to start with? Which album do you want to start with?
So, I mean, it would be kind of boring and too easy to kind of just repeat the albums that I've said for other places, on if you want to find out what I think about, about Fawn Limbs, their album Sleeper Vessels, or Asitas and their album False Peace, or Anal Nathrak and their album Endarkment, you can go watch that on Banger TV. So I'm not going to talk about those. So I'm grateful that this is not the kind of thing that's like ordered, because orders change, and I'm not going to talk about those because I want to give as much spotlight as I can to as many albums. So I guess the first one that I'd start with is, it makes sense because I ordered it yesterday or 2 days ago, or on vinyl. I ordered it. It's the band, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but Thetas. Their album Shrines to Absurdity, which is a Maggot Stomp release. Are you familiar with them at all?
No, I didn't hear that album. Of all the albums that I listened to this year, that was not one of them. So what can you tell me about that record?
So yeah, I just ordered it on vinyl through Maggot Stomp. The band Maggot Stomp is like really known for like their old school death metal thing. They have like a tagline like it's like caveman shit. I wrote an article about them for Bandcamp, and this is one of the albums that kind of goes outside of the sound that they're known for. Not a lot, like it's still death metal and still old school, but there's this band and Unearnment, which kind of lean a little bit more on the technical side of things. So these guys come from New York, and they've definitely picked up on the home state Suffocation vibes, which is to say it's always technical and brutal, but at times they kind of double down on the brutality, kind of like other disciples of Suffocation, like Defeated Sanity, and the more modern brutal technical death metal bands like Defeated Sanity, Wormed, all those ones. And then at other times they kind of double down on like the weirdness and the skronky kind of vibes of Gorguts. And then the vocals are a favorite of mine in that they're like otherworldly. They're not, at least not human. You can't really describe this just as gurgling. The noises they make are awesome. There's a track on here. I wrote this one down. I have some notes here for some of these albums. For some of them, I'm just going to be going off the top of my head. But there's a song called All Consuming Dread, and it's got like this like really like slow plod. It's like it's so against the rest of the album, and that like really accentuate it and makes the All Consuming Dread like that much more real. But yeah, so this is for fans of like death metal, or like brutal death metal that's technical, or technical death metal that's brutal, in the vein
of the bands that you mentioned. It's quite the mixture you have going on there, like Worm, Gorgot. I mean, like you're going all over the spectrum of death metal and technical death metal. There's a lot to digest there. This sounds like a record that you can't just sit it in one sitting and kind of go through it. You kind of have to work your way through it.
Yeah. And if I were to say, one band that could really sum up their approach, it would have to be either Suffocation or Defeated Sanity for sure. Like those, like that. If you were to tell me like what 2 bands does this sound or the most like, because both of those bands go off on weirdness and they go off on the brutality, but they kind of come back home. So to sum it up, those would be the bands. But yeah, like it's definitely like you get rewarded for listening to it more and more.
What was the final nail in the coffin that drove you to order the vinyl?
I was so Scott from Maggot Stomp put up a few more Frozen Soul LPs from their EP, and I ordered one of those, and I'd already considered ordering this, but I hadn't, because shipping from America to up here on vinyl ain't great. And then I did it with the Frozen Soul thing, and then I hit up Scott and I'm like, hey, can I also get this? And I got this, and sorry, my dad's computer lit up to beside me. I I also got this and a few other things. So I've got a little package coming my way from Maggot Stomp, which I'm excited about. I got, like I said, the Frozen Soul encased in ice on the icy colorway. I got this. I got the Mourned Devoured Humanity 7-inch on blue vinyl, and I got Vomit Forth their Northeastern Deprivation LP on red. And I think Devoured Humanity is the name of the Mourned album. I think both Vomit Forth and Mourned are releasing albums next year, so that'll be a treat. But yeah, it was just because I bought something else because it went on sale, and I was like, oh, I don't have that yet. And I kind of impulse bought it, and then I was like, since I'm getting something shipped up here, I might as well throw a few other things on the order.
Make it worthwhile. And probably it's going to arrive after Christmas, so it's one of those late Christmas gifts from you to you.
Exactly. So
can't go wrong with those.
I always have stuff coming that I forgot about, and then I'm like, oh, it shows up at my door. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I forgot that I got that.
It's a nice little surprise. So, what other album in your top 5 do you have?
Where am I gonna go from here? I'll go with Xenobiotic and their album Mordrake, which is a Unique Leader release. Are you familiar with it?
That's another one. I mean, I'm sure your top 5 is going to be stuff that I haven't checked out this year. And so far, you're going like really under the radar with some of these records, which is really interesting because at the end of the day, like it also opens the door for me to then go and check some of the ones that you're mentioning because you're piquing my interest.
Yeah, well, good. That's the goal, right? There's no point in me saying go listen to
Trivium.
Yeah, you know Trivium, and they're masters at what they do, but they don't get anything out of me saying that, So I try to, and I just tend to like more underground stuff more. It's generally more interesting to me.
So this one, what was about this record that appealed to you?
So I think
for the fans that don't know the band, what can they expect from this record?
Yeah, so Xenobiotic, I think that they could be the metal scene's next, like, Rivers of Nile kind of band, like a breakout in that it's like progressive and technical death metal, but like it's not progressive death metal, it's not technical death metal, it's both of them, yeah, those two often go hand in hand, you know what I mean? And somehow, Rivers of Nile, and I think that these guys could as well, appeal to both, the more elitist metal fans and fans of more like core-leaning music. These guys do not have how Rivers of Nile kind of have that genty guitar tone.
Mm-hmm.
These guys don't have that, but the production is still very like clean and sounds really good. The album flows really well, like Rivers of Nile. I think that's something that band did really well on Where Owls May Know Their Names, something like that. I don't know, something about owls. I'm terrible with album titles.
I'm terrible with names, period. My dyslexia goes in full effect.
Hell yeah. But yeah, and this one at times gets like a little bit more dissonant than the Rivers of Nile one does.
Do they throw any like weird stuff at you, like Rivers of Nile with that album throwing some other things that perhaps fans were not expecting, like the saxophone and stuff? Like, do these guys do anything like that?
Not so much. It's more, I think in the feel, of the album, and like the sound and the quality and the flow. It's got like a really nice oh man, who's the artist? He's Marius Lewansky or whatever. You know, the guy who did the Bell Witch. Um, Marius Lewandowski. They got like a cover art.
Lewandowski.
Yeah, they got a cover art from him, and it looks really cool. So it's just, yeah, they're not doing like the weird, instrument thing, but it's the feel, the genre, the how clean it sounds, how well it all comes together. It kind of reminds me of Rivers of Nile.
Where are they from?
Australia, I think. Let me just
Oh.
double check.
I'm not totally shocked. Australia seems to be a place for a band like that to emerge out of. Like, there's a lot of bands that follow similar patterns in terms of not being afraid of taking risks and being a little bit strange with their sound. Perhaps the most common one would be Neil Blevascaris, but they're not the only one. So Omega Infinity comes to mind as well as a band that's not afraid of taking a little bit of liberties and pushing their sound into the outer limits of space, if you will.
Yeah, no, they're from Australia. I double checked, so
Oh,
I guess
wow.
it's not such a surprise, although it does make it. I hope that they're able to come over here and succeed over here, right? Because that's obviously quite the barrier to doing so, is living a 24-hour plane flight away. So
yeah, Australian bands have a lot of things going against them. I mean, they're really physically and from a musical perspective a little bit isolated from the rest of the world. So it's hard for a band to break through and then get traction outside of Australia. Not many bands have been able to do it successfully.
Yeah.
So it's always it's a challenge for sure. And touring in Australia, it's crazy too, because to go from city to city, you need to fly almost. I mean, it's not like you can do a decent Australian tour on a van.
Yeah. It's I don't envy them, although I saw an article that apparently Australian bands are going to be able to tour sooner than the rest of the world because they've got apparently COVID a little bit more under control. So if that's the case, they might start building a little bit of a more of an explosive scene there that hopefully they'll be able to translate over here. So
yeah, that's true. So next on your list, who's next?
Like I said, I've got a whole list here, and it's like I'm kind of just like picking like what I feel like talking about right now. This is kind of it's like a 2-for-1. You're getting 2-for-1 here. So I'm gonna go with Gorphilia and their album In the Eye of Nothing, which is it's like it's I think a co-release between Dark Descent and this label called, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, Misako Un Ojo. I'm not sure. But the cover art really reminds me of the Eclipse segment of Berserk, with it's like red all over the place and kind of looks like hellish, and there's like these like disembodied eyes in the sky looking down. It's they actually have a song called the Walls of Weeping Eyes, which I guess is kind of personified on the album cover. And it's got and the ending of that song kind of like slows down in increments, like it's like a steady like slow down, which is like super devastating. But overall, like the band is on the the Morbid Angel kind of immolation side of death metal, where it's definitely old school but also got a little bit of like evil to it. And then the reason I want to tie this in with another one is because they've done a split with Undergang, and they just released a new one. I'm gonna screw this pronunciation up too. Aldrig Levet. I don't know. Same labels there. So again, another tie-in there. These guys make some serious subhuman burp vocal kind of things, and they're able to make like under 2-minute songs feel like full-on songs. Whereas like Gorphilia was more on like the Morbid Angel immolation kind of evil kind of side of things. These guys are a little bit more like knuckle draggy, like Autopsy or Obituary, but like if you like flush them down the toilet to make it a little bit more gnarly, like a I don't know, Disma or something.
Look at the description. They sound like Obituary if you flush them down the toilet. Wow.
Yeah, there we go. I know how to talk sometimes.
Yeah, I think that was a compliment. I think that was a compliment somewhere in. Yeah, I don't think that was a diss at all. I think that was an actual compliment. Now,
Yes.
you said that they were a little bit of more of an angel. So is the feel of the record like throwback, but is the production modern, or does it have both, like a throwback feel and an old style production value to it?
Yeah, like this is a weird one with a lot of these bands where they're like an old school sounding band, but it sounds really good, but it also purposely sounds pretty filthy around the edge. So it's like I it's feel like a lot of these bands, what they're kind of going for is the old school vibe, but they've kind of perfected the how they do it with some modern technology. And I think that that's probably this, the same kind of thing here where it's, production wise, it sounds like thicker and meatier, like you
But
know,
still a little bit grimy.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay. I get the feel for that. I like that approach. I like bands that are going for that old school style of death metal, but they still have some more modern ways of putting it together, but they still keep that griminess. That filth is still, it's not full on there like the old records had it, but it's still there around the edges. You can pick it up in certain parts of the songs and as you progress through the album.
yeah, that's kind of it's like
Yeah,
the perfect
I like that shit. All right, what's next on your list? We're getting down to the last two.
yeah, see, this is where it gets hard. Um I guess I'm gonna go with see, I could do a whole thing on, you know, on just this label on P2. Are you familiar with that label at all?
No, I haven't heard of that label.
So the album in question that I was gonna mention, but realistically I could mention it for like many of their bands. But I was gonna say miasmatic, I'm not sure. Miasmatic Necrosis and their album Apex Profane, which is like it's like a really like filthy kind of like gore grind kind of album. But P2 has also, released like bands like Incenithrak, which is like it's Colin Marsden from like he plays in Gorguts and Behold the Octopus, but it's like insanely brutal, technical, weirdo death metal. I think a lot of it is improv. And then, they've done other stuff like this band, the Heretics Fork, and they did Edenic Past. So I could realistically just do stuff from this label, but yeah, I guess in particular the miasmatic necrosis feels like we were saying earlier, where it's like they toe the line well, where it feels really old school, but it feels just modern enough to feel modern. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a really hard sound to describe to somebody who hasn't heard the band because it kind of merges that old school with the new elements, and they do it in a way that it doesn't feel completely old school, but it also doesn't feel completely modern. It just kind of has like it walks that fine line between them, you know.
and this one definitely I would say like is even more rough than the last few albums, that I mentioned. Like it's definitely like rougher around the edges. But I think gore grind as a whole, as a genre, started from an even rougher point. So it can be a little bit rougher, but still be like a good level of like audible for uh for the genre.
Or I was going to say for the more sensible minds, but for the genre, that's good too.
Yeah, for more.
I'll take that. I'll take that. Before we go into your last pick, let me just ask you this: how many albums did you listen to this year? Do you keep track?
No, I don't keep track. I should, but I it's stressful listening to as much music as I try to listen to. And I find that it's exacerbated by, you know, not necessarily having as much stuff on your computer as much as you used to, just going through Spotify more than iTunes or whatever. Because back then, like when you had all of your stuff in one place, you could kind of just press shuffle play and it would play stuff for you. And now you kind of have to remember what you're after a little bit more. So I think I need to start getting back to getting all my files organized.
Do you find it difficult? Before I ask you the last band, do you find it difficult that, like, when you listen to so many albums, at least for me, I have this problem. I listen to so many albums, and then I barely have time to listen to the albums that I enjoyed the most, because there's always the next album that I want to check out. There's always the next album that I want to listen to. There's always the next release, and I always feel like I'm always moving from one release to the next, and I barely have any time to actually spend time on the albums that I enjoy the most. Do you have that problem, or you always go back to your favorites?
And I mean, I used to have the problem more, and I got so burnt out on music that I went to school. I was like, I need to get out of covering music professionally. Like, I don't like doing this anymore. And I just kind of like recentered my approach to things. And I just listen to what I want to listen to now. I mean, I listen to other stuff, out of professional obligation to an extent, but I don't let it like run my my days as much as I used to. I give myself more time to listen to stuff for pleasure. And a lot of the time when you're doing reviews, there's not necessarily like a way to put into words why one thing is better than the other. You just prefer the one, but on paper they're kind of the same level of quality, right? Like one isn't eons better, and I'm just kind of letting my my, I guess, innate sense for what is better. I'm kind of letting that run rampant a little bit more and giving that a little bit more freedom, where it's like, I like this one better. I'm just going to listen to this one, like whatever, and it's frustrating as a professional not really being able to put that into words exactly why it's better. And that's something that, we constantly aim to get better at. But I think there is something to be said about just like putting your foot down and saying, well, this one is better. It just is. And so I listened. I used to struggle with that a lot. And now I'm like, well, that made this whole thing not as fun. So fuck it. I'm just going to listen to what I want to listen to. I'll check stuff out.
How many times do you go through an album before you prepare a review, either on Banger or when you're writing for a magazine? Like, do you have a certain amount of times that you like to go through it, or each album plays itself differently?
It really depends. Yeah. Like, with a band like, Black Dahlia Murder, I just watched their live stream yesterday. It was great. I feel like they could put out an album and I could whip out a release after one listen because I've listened to that band for over half my life now. Whereas with some bands I'm not as familiar with, like, I don't know, for example, Devil Driver. I did a review for them for Banger, and that one took me a little bit longer because it's not a band that I've actively listened to, where I did a Hatebreed review, and that was a little bit easier because I've, kind of had my feelings and opinions on the releases as they've come out. So it really depends. But generally it's more than one person would expect. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that, people think that journalists like listens to an album once and then just kind of write down what they think. And I'm sure there are people who do that. But I'm not one of them. I especially think it's important to listen a lot if you think an album sucks.
Yeah.
Because I think you need to give it a chance to show you its secrets, if there are any, because this is somebody's work that they've put a lot of time and effort into, and I think that you should respect that even if you don't like it. So for example, with when I reviewed that Suicide Silence nu metal album like a bunch of years back, the self-titled one, I listened to that a lot and I did not have fun doing it because I didn't enjoy it. And I would start to get bummed out when I would all right, at 8:00 tonight, I'm going to listen to it a couple times. And I would as that time was starting to roll around, I would get bummed out, but it's I would have to do it because it's you kind of have that obligation. I think if you're doing this professionally, there are enough people who do it not professionally, just tweeting out their opinions, and that's cool and that's their prerogative. But if you're being held up as a bastion of some organization that's greater than yourself, I think you have a larger
you have a different kind of obligation, I feel.
Yeah, and that doesn't go just for me writing for places. I mean, that's for you and your channel, because it's your channel, but it's also an entity unto itself, whereas somebody just on Twitter just tweeting stuff is That's just their Twitter. That's fine. They can just
Yeah,
kind of do
I'm with
that.
you 100%. I actually listen to the albums that I dislike more than the ones that I like because I want to make sure that I really feel the way I feel before I say something negative about the album. Because, like you said, this is somebody's work, and I think you have to take that in consideration. And at the end of the day, this is my personal opinion. Just because I don't like something, it doesn't mean it's not good. It just didn't work for me. That's kind of how I look at it, and I think that's how people should approach it. So yeah, it's just some people have a misconception. I know some people who listen to the album once and they write a review on a magazine or on a website. There's no way I could do that. I just feel like I would have missed something. Um, so I'm with you. The least I like the record, the more I listen to it. It's not necessarily a good thing because the negatives that you find, they start to getting exacerbated. You're just noticing them more and more every time you play the damn record, so but then there's that odd time that you like. For me, like Black Crown Initiated, for example, this year, the album that they released, the first time I listened to it, I didn't like it, and then the more that I listened to it, the more actually I liked it. So that was a different result. That actually worked out better for me. Listening to the album multiple times, it allowed me to really enjoy that record, and now it's really one of those albums that comes out of this year as one of the top albums, at
Yeah.
least to me.
That's one band that I've tried and I've never connected with them. Every album they put out, I've tried. So maybe I'll go back and give it another listen. But yeah, for whatever reason, that's just like. But like in that case, like I just like don't want to talk about it. Like I don't want to say it sucks. I just like don't want to listen to it. I just like I don't want to be negative, man. It's just like there's no point. Like I'm trying to think of an album for me that grew on me the more I listened to it.
For me this year, that one is the one that stands out because the first time that I listened to it, I didn't like it at all. And then every time that I played it, I discovered something different. I discovered something new, and I actually start to enjoy the record more and more. By the time that I was finished and getting ready to record the review, I had listened to the album like 10 times, and I was like, wow, I really dig this record. So it was like it went from one polar opposite to the next. So it went the full spectrum. But that doesn't happen very often. It's kind of cool when it does, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, generally, like I kind of know. I think I'm pretty like in tune with what I like and what I don't like. So I'm, pretty able to say this sucks right off the bat, or this is great right off the bat. Actually, I guess the one thing that I would say that happened with, is the latest Suicide Silence album. I guess I end up talking about that band a lot, but
We
where
talked about that album when for people that don't know, you sent me a message when the album was released because I was doing a review and you're like, hey, what were your thoughts about it? And we kind of chit chatted at the time, and at the time I know you were not a huge fan of it. Things changed.
well, I'm still not a huge fan of it because I still we're talking about the new one, the heavy one again. We're not talking about the new metal one anymore. But when I first heard it, I really hated it, and I thought there were like no redeeming qualities. And the more I listened to it, the more I was like, okay, it's good. It's not great. I do find their maybe motivation to do this is a little suspect, where it seems like they're maybe trying to save their career after all the things that they said about deathcore music being, creatively void or whatever. But there were more redeeming moments on it than I initially thought. And that happened with the maybe the latest In Flames, if I remember correctly, where I was just like, like what the, and then as I listened more, I was like, there's more there. And I think that tends to happen more with bands that I am quite familiar with because I know what I want from them. And when they don't give me that, my initial reaction is like, what the hell? Come on. And then I'll listen to it more and you start to chip away at your preconceived notions of what you expect or want this band to be. And you're able to be like, okay, there is some validity here. I can still think that it's not as good as I want it to be, but there are parts here that are cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree. I agree with you. I actually agree with you on the In Flames one. I felt the same way about that record as well. When it first came out, I was like, it's good. It's different. It's good. I mean, it's okay. Now I actually found myself listening to it quite a bit. So it's strange sometimes how some records, they're almost like a virus. They stay with you and then they just kind of like chip away. at your shell, and next thing you know, you're like having them really high on your playlist.
What was that song? This Is Our House. That song is an
Oh,
abort and deserved to go to hell.
that song I still don't like. All
Yeah.
right, so that's I still don't like that song. So that my opinion on that track hasn't changed.
I think I can't remember. It might be. I think it was actually the title track, "I the Mask." I think that one was like that was like my favorite one, if I remember correctly. Like that. It's either that or "I Am Above." I can't
I'm
remember.
above. For me, I'm above is my favorite. The Mask is like second close favorite, but I'm above. That's definitely. And for me, that song grew on me because I watched them live twice. So I saw them perform that song live twice, and it worked really well live. So that made a difference for me, and it actually impacted the whole experience of the record. Watching the band perform the new tracks live made me actually appreciate the record more. But not This Is Our House. That one's still like that's just like let's not even go there.
Yeah, I just like to make fun of that song. I feel so bad for the new drummer of the band. The only song he performed on the album is "This Is Our House." I'm like, man, I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. He's I like his old band Undermined though. So
Yeah, he's a good drummer, and he's a good live drummer too.
yeah, hell yeah.
So the last album, let's put it this way: if you were stuck in quarantine in the great city of Kitchener, Ontario, where
Yeah.
nowhere to go, nowhere to travel, no shows to see, and you can only have one album to listen to for this whole quarantine, which album would that be? That
Man.
came out this year. That came out this year.
Hmm. See, this is hard because at first we weren't talking in any order, and now we're putting this like level of like,
Well, because this is the last one, so we got to make the last one count.
yeah. Um, fuck, man. I'm gonna fuck. I was like between Temple of Void and Imperial Triumphant for this. You know, I
Okay,
like both
so
of.
let's tackle Imperial Triumphant because I got to listen to the album. I didn't do a review on it because I didn't like it. And
Yeah.
and like you, I didn't want to do a review where I talk for 10 minutes about something I don't like. I might as well just not record anything at that point because
Yeah.
I couldn't find any redeeming qualities in that record that appealed to me. So what it was about that record that appealed to you?
Uh, it's ugly. You know, it's super dissonant and ugly, but like it comes from like a musical place, you know, like they're like trained like jazz musicians. You know, they teach their instrument to people, they play in other jazz bands or whatever. So like it's coming from a, you know, the dissonance is coming and the ugliness is coming from a place where like they know exactly what they're doing. So I'm sure it's very calculated in such a way. I really like ugly dissonant music. I do. If I'm listening to something heavy, I want it to be really heavy, and if I'm not, I'll listen to something not. Like the days of me, I still like some of like the metalcore stuff that's like in between and it's like super catchy but super not. But I find more often than not these days I'm going to like the edges where it's like I want super extreme or I want not heavy at all. And funnily enough, like you know, a lot of the metalcore stuff, you know, people will be like, you know, people who aren't into metal will be like, oh, this is crazy. I'm like, this is like easy listening for me. Like this is my day off, you know, from intensity. But yeah, it's I spoke with somebody about this and they were like, I don't hear any like riffs on it, but it's like I don't think it's like a riff based album. It's about like a feeling. And it's ugly. And I like I don't know.
You find beauty in its ugliness.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the band is really interesting in I really like how they, you know, their whole like visual is, you know, the gold masks and stuff, which is, you know, polar opposite to black metal and their, you know, white and black corpse paint. And this is kind of like, but it's because of that, perhaps even more off-putting. And you're like, whoa, what the hell are you, what the fuck? You know? It's just really interesting. Not that they're like a, you know, a black metal band. They're like, you know, black metal in the same way as like a Death Spell Omega is. They're death metal in the same way that like a Gorguts is. You know, they're kind of like right in between there. But yeah, I don't know. I like how ugly it is. I like how difficult it is to listen to. I
I had a really hard time going through that record, and I was like, it's just it didn't. I'm not judging the album. It didn't work for me. You know what I mean? Like it's not my thing. So I was just like, I don't know.
I'll send you some like I'll send you a song or two from like their earlier stuff, which is which initially hooked me, and then see if that can hook you because this album I didn't connect with as immediately as the previous one. I like it a lot, but like the last one, like when I first heard it, I was like, whoa. Whereas like this one, I was just like, it took me a few more listens. Like I liked it from the get go, but it took me a few more listens to get it. Whereas like the last one, it was a little bit. So I'll try to find like I'll try to pick like the best introduction song that I can off that one,
All
and
right.
maybe that'll sell you on the band. Or maybe not. That's fine. You know, that's what music is for.
Yeah, yeah. I just for me, this was my first time listening to the band, so I was kind of like, I think maybe I went with a preconceived idea of what I was expecting from them, and then when I press play, I'm like, wow, like what the like I don't even have words to describe that sound or how it is. It's almost something you just listen to it and you feel, and if it hits you, it hits you, and if it doesn't hit you, it doesn't hit you. It is what it is. It's one of those bands. But I agree with what you said. I don't think there's any riffs in there. Not that there has to be, but it's just a weird sound to me. Like I had a hard time wrapping my head around what am I listening to.
Yeah, they're definitely more interested, I think, in crafting soundscapes than they are with sick riffs. I mean, you're wearing a creator shirt, you know, they're more concerned about riffs or whatever. So
Yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that. Well, Bradley, man, thank you very much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I haven't seen you in a very long time because obviously there's no shows. I know we normally cross paths at shows in Toronto, so it's been a long time since I've seen you in person. So it's very nice to be able to catch up and talk to you today about your favorite picks of 2020. All the best for you, man, and during the holidays next year. All the best. I wish you health and success at school, and just do your thing, man.
thank you, man. You as well. And I'll yeah, look forward to seeing you around doubly because that'll mean that we're back at shows too,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah, yeah. Looking forward to that, man. Looking forward to that. All right, take care, man.
all right. Cheers, dude. Be well.